Hello and welcome back to English on Point, the podcast that makes learning English an absolute joy.
You've probably been in this situation. Someone in a meeting says something you don't fully agree with, but you don't want to shut them down, create tension, or sound combative. So you stay quiet. Or you say something vague like, yeah, that's interesting, and hope no one notices your hesitation. But silence isn't neutrality. It's often interpreted as agreement, and vague agreement can lead to misalignment, wasted effort, or even project failure. What if you could navigate these moments with precision, agreeing where you genuinely align, gently challenging where you don't, and doing it all in a way that builds trust rather than friction? That's not just communication skill. That's professional fluency. Welcome to English on Point podcast. I'm glad you're here. Today, we're going deep into one of the most undertaught but critical skills for intermediate and advanced English learners: mastering nuanced agreement and disagreement in professional settings. This isn't about memorizing "I disagree" or "I agree." Native speakers rarely use those blunt phrases in real workplace conversations. Instead, we use a sophisticated toolkit of hedging, framing, partial alignment, and strategic questioning to express our views while preserving collaboration. By the end of this episode, you'll understand how to express partial agreement without sounding evasive, disagree diplomatically without undermining your credibility, use softening language to make strong opinions more palatable, recognize when someone is agreeing in principle but not in practice, navigate group dynamics when opinions diverge, and deploy 4 key strategies professionals use daily to manage disagreement gracefully. This episode is designed for learners who already understand English well, but want to speak with the subtlety, confidence, and social intelligence of a native professional. No slow speech, no oversimplification, just real, nuanced English as it's actually used in global workplaces. Let's begin with a fundamental truth. In professional English, how you disagree matters more than whether you disagree. A poorly framed objection can shut down dialogue. A well-framed one can elevate it. The difference lies in language, but not the kind you find in textbooks. Most learners are taught binary phrases: I agree or I disagree. But real conversations exist in the gray zone between those extremes. Native speakers constantly operate in that space using what linguists call hedging and boosting. Hedging softens a statement to show openness, like this might not be the best approach. Boosting strengthens it for emphasis, like this is clearly the best path forward. But even boosting is often wrapped in collaborative framing. So instead of I disagree, you'll hear things like I see where you're coming from, and at the same time, I wonder if we've considered. That's a valid point, though I'm not entirely convinced it applies here. I'm with you on the goal. Maybe we differ on the method. Notice the pattern? These phrases do 3 things simultaneously: acknowledge the other person's perspective, position your view as complementary, not oppositional, and invite further discussion rather than closing it. This is the core of professional disagreement. It's not about winning, it's about co-creating better outcomes. Let's break down the main strategies professionals use and how you can start using them today. Strategy 1: partial agreement with a pivot. This is the most common and effective approach. You agree with part of what was said, then pivot to your concern or alternative. The key is to make the agreement genuine, not perfunctory. For example, imagine a colleague says, we should launch the product next month to beat the competition. You think it's too soon. Instead of saying, that's a bad idea, you might say, I completely agree that speed is critical right now. Getting ahead of competitor X would be a huge win. At the same time, I'm concerned that rushing QA could backfire if we ship with bugs. What if we targeted a soft launch in 4 weeks, with a full launch 2 weeks after that? Notice how this works. I completely agree that speed is critical, validates their core concern. At the same time, smooth transition, not but, which negates what came before. I'm concerned that frames the objection as shared risk, not personal criticism, ends with a solution, keeps the conversation constructive. This structure, agree, pivot, propose, is your go-to for 80% of professional disagreements. Strategy 2, question-based disagreement. Sometimes, the best way to challenge an idea is not to state your objection directly, but to ask a question that leads the other person to see the gap themselves. This is especially powerful in hierarchical settings or with sensitive stakeholders. Instead of, your timeline is unrealistic, try, what assumptions are we making about engineering bandwidth this sprint? Or, how are we planning to handle user onboarding if we launch before the help docs are ready? These questions do several things. They sound curious, not confrontational. They shift the focus from opinion, like I think, to shared reality, like what's the plan? They give the other person space to adjust their position without losing face. The art here is asking open, non-leading questions that genuinely explore the issue, not rhetorical ones that imply criticism. Have you thought about X? Can sound passive-aggressive if your tone isn't careful. Better to say, I'd love to understand how we're approaching X. Strategy 3, framing disagreement as shared goals. This is the gold standard for high-stakes disagreements. You reframe your objection not as a rejection of their idea, but as a commitment to a shared objective. For instance, them say, let's cut the research phase to save 2 weeks. You say, I'm 100% aligned on hitting the Q3 deadline. To make sure we don't compromise on user trust, which is also a Q3 goal, could we explore a leaner research approach instead of cutting it entirely? Here, you've affirmed the shared goal, hitting the Q3 deadline, introduced another shared value, user trust, and offered an alternative that serves both. This turns a no into a yes and, which is far more likely to be heard. Strategy 4, using hedging to signal openness. Even when you're confident in your view, using mild hedging language can make your input more digestible. This isn't about sounding weak. It's about signaling that you're open to being wrong. Compare, this won't work. Sounds absolute, closed. I'm not sure this will work. Sounds reflective, open. This might not work as intended. Focuses on outcome, not judgment. Common hedging phrases include, I'm not entirely convinced. It's possible that, one thing I'm wondering is, from my perspective, these don't dilute your message. They make it more collaborative. Now, let's talk about agreement, because even saying yes has nuance. In professional settings, blanket agreement can be as problematic as blunt disagreement. It can signal disengagement, lack of critical thinking, or even passive resistance. Nuanced agreement in practice. True professional agreement often includes qualification. I agree, especially if we can secure the budget. Enthusiasm calibration. I'm cautiously optimistic about this direction. Conditional support. I'm on board provided we monitor the metrics weekly. And sometimes what sounds like agreement is actually polite deferral. Phrases like, that's worth considering, or I'll think about that, often mean, I don't agree, but I'm not ready to debate it now. Learning to read these cues and use them strategically is part of advanced fluency. Let's look at some real-world dialogues to see these strategies in action. Dialogue 1, team brainstorming session. Context, a marketing team is debating campaign themes. Alex proposes a bold, edgy concept. Jordan has reservations. I really think we should go bold this time, something disruptive that grabs attention. The safe route hasn't moved the needle lately. I hear you, disruption is definitely needed, and I love the energy in your concept. At the same time, I'm a bit cautious about how it might land with our core users. They've responded really well to warmth and authenticity in the past. What if we kept the bold visual style, but anchored it in a more human story? That's an interesting angle. So, edgy design, but emotional narrative? Exactly. It could give us the best of both, cutting through the noise while still feeling like us. Notice how Jordan validated Halix's core point, disruption is needed, used at the same time instead of but, framed the concern around user response, shared goal, offered a hybrid solution. This kept the collaboration alive while steering the idea. Dialogue 2, client feedback call. Context: a client loves a design but wants to add more features. The designer knows it will clutter the interface. This layout is clean, I love it, but can we add the live chat widget, the social feed, and the promo banner? It'll make it more dynamic. I'm glad the layout's working for you. Those are all valuable features. To keep the user experience as clean as the layout you liked, what if we tested adding them one at a time? That way we can see which ones actually drive engagement without overwhelming the page. That makes sense. Maybe start with just the chat widget? Perfect. I'll mock that up for our next review. Here, the designer started with genuine praise, acknowledged the value of the request, reframed the objection as protecting the client's own goal, clean user experience, proposed a phased approach, compromise. No was said, but the scope was protected. Dialogue 3, leadership alignment meeting. Context: two directors disagree on resource allocation. We need to shift 30% of the dev team to Project Alpha. It's our top priority this quarter. I'm fully aligned on Project Alpha's importance. To make sure we don't jeopardize Project Beta, which is also tied to Q3 revenue, could we explore a smaller shift? Maybe 15% now with the option to scale if Alpha hits its first milestone. That's reasonable. Let's look at the milestone criteria. Director B used the shared goal strategy perfectly, tying both projects to the same business outcome, Q3 revenue, and offering a data-driven compromise. Dialogue 4, peer feedback on a proposal. Context: a colleague shares a draft proposal. You spot a major flaw. You: thanks for sharing this. It's clear you've put a lot of thought into the structure. One thing I'm wondering, have we accounted for the new compliance regulations in the timeline? I recall they go into effect next month, and that could impact the legal review phase. Oh, shoot. I completely forgot about that. Good catch. No problem. Maybe we can loop in legal early next week to assess the impact. Here, you led with specific praise, structure, used a question to surface the issue, offered support, loop in legal, no blame, just problem solving. Now, let's address a subtle but critical skill: reading between the lines when others disagree with you. In professional settings, people rarely say, "I disagree" outright, especially if they're your manager, client, or senior colleague. Instead, they use indirect signals. Learning to spot these can save you from moving forward on shaky ground. Common indirect disagreement cues. That's an interesting approach. Often means, I have concerns but won't say them now. I'm not sure how that would work in practice. Translation: I think it's flawed. Let's circle back on that. Usually means, I don't want to pursue this. Long pause followed by a change of subject, strong resistance. When you hear these, it's your cue to dig deeper gently. I'd love to hear more about your concerns, or what part feels unclear. Conversely, be mindful of your own indirect language. If you genuinely agree, say so clearly. I'm fully on board with this direction. Ambiguity breeds uncertainty. Another advanced nuance: cultural variation in disagreement. In the US, directness is often valued, within reason. In the UK, understatement rules, like, that's a bit ambitious equals that's unrealistic. In many Asian cultures, saving face is paramount. Disagreement is signaled through silence, vague agreement, or third-party channels. In Germany or the Netherlands, bluntness is respected if it's fact-based. The key is adapting your style to your audience while staying authentic. Now, let's talk about tone, because even perfect phrasing can fall flat with the wrong delivery. In spoken English, intonation, pace, and stress convey as much meaning as words. A rising intonation at the end of a statement, like, "We should launch next month," can make it sound uncertain or questioning, even though the words are confident. A flat, low tone can sound dismissive, like, that won't work. Aim for a steady, mid-range pitch with slight upward inflection on collaborative phrases, like, what if we try this? And calm, level tone on assertions, like, I'm confident this will work. Record yourself practicing these phrases. Listen for, does your voice sound open or closed? Are you rushing through objections? Do you sound curious or judgmental? Adjust until it feels natural. Finally, let's address the mindset behind nuanced communication. Many learners avoid disagreement because they fear conflict or rejection. But professional disagreement isn't personal. It's a necessary part of innovation and quality control. The goal isn't to avoid tension, but to channel it productively. When you frame your input as a contribution to shared success, not a personal opinion, you free yourself to speak up. And remember, silence isn't safe. Unspoken disagreement often leads to passive resistance, missed deadlines, or half-hearted execution. Speaking up respectfully is actually an act of loyalty to the team, the project, and the truth. So, how do you practice this? Start small. In your next meeting, try one of these phrases. I'm with you on X. Could we explore Y? What's our plan for Z? I'm curious how we're thinking about potential risk. Notice how people respond. Refine your approach. Over time, it becomes second nature. Before we wrap up, let's recap the key takeaways. Replace binary agreement-disagreement with partial alignment and pivots. Use questions to surface issues without confrontation. Frame objections as shared goals to keep collaboration alive. Hedge strategically to signal openness, not weakness. Read indirect cues from others and be clear in your own agreement. Adapt to cultural context without losing your voice. Practice tone and delivery. They're half the message. This isn't about being nice. It's about being effective. The most influential professionals aren't the loudest. They're the ones who can navigate complexity with clarity and care. Thanks for listening to English on Point podcast. If this resonated, subscribe for more advanced real-world English. No fluff, just skills that move the needle. Drop a comment with a situation where you wished you'd handled agreement or disagreement better. I'll help you reframe it. Until next time, speak with precision, listen with curiosity, and always aim for shared understanding. You've got this.